Imagine a powerful Roman governor, surrounded by the intense heat of a Middle Eastern sun, sweat dripping down his brow, standing before a restless crowd in ancient Jerusalem. And he's about to make a decision that will change the course of history. Some say that Pilate was just a reluctant governor, a man forced into a corner. But others believe he saw something in Jesus, something that made him question the very nature of the man standing before him. He refrained from disclosing a concealed reality. What could have been so terrifying that a Roman leader would choose to keep it to himself, even as he condemned a man to death? Pilate's own wife sent him a message, warning him about a disturbing dream she had, and begging him to have nothing to do with Jesus' death. This story is about the secrets, fears, and decisions that still echo through time. It's about how one man's actions set the stage for events that changed the world forever. And most of all, it's about the possibility that Pilate knew the true identity of Jesus, and that he was too afraid to act on what he knew. The shouts of "Crucify him" fill the air, but Pilate's mind is racing. Is he worried about an uprising, losing his power, or is he struggling with a deeper fear, one that whispers that this man might actually be more than he seems? Pilate washes his hands in front of the crowd, a symbolic act that says, "This isn't my responsibility." Around 30 AD, the air is thick with tension, the city buzzing with rumors about a man named Jesus of Nazareth. Crowds gather, whispering about his miracles, his teachings, and the growing unease among the Jewish leaders. And at the center of this storm stands Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, appointed by Emperor Tiberius in 26 AD. Pilate's role in this story is more than just a judge. He is the gatekeeper between peace and chaos, between the law of Rome and the demands of the local Jewish authorities. But his decision that day would haunt history forever. Pilate was a powerful man, tasked with keeping order in one of Rome's most challenging territories. Judea was a province filled with religious tension, where Roman rule clashed with Jewish traditions. Pilate knew that one wrong move could trigger a revolt. Yet amidst these pressures, he found himself dealing with a case unlike any he had seen before. The Jewish council, the Sanhedrin, brought Jesus to him, accusing him of blasphemy and claiming that he posed a threat to Rome by declaring himself King of the Jews. He had seen rebellions before, and he knew that if he didn't handle this situation carefully, it could end in bloodshed. But this time, it wasn't just about a political rebel. It was about a man who spoke of a kingdom, not of this world. Pilate likely wondered if this was just another troublemaker or something far more dangerous. In his mind, there was a delicate balance between Roman law and the local customs of the Jewish population. The Sanhedrin could judge Jesus according to their religious laws, but they didn't have the power to carry out a death sentence. That authority lay with Rome, and Pilate was the one who had to decide. He must have weighed his options, considering the consequences of either decision. If he released Jesus, he risked angering the Jewish leaders and possibly sparking a riot. But if he condemned him, he might be sentencing an innocent man, one who claimed to be the very Son of God. As Pilate questioned Jesus, he realized that this was no ordinary trial. Jesus remained mostly silent, only offering cryptic answers like, "My kingdom is not of this world," John 18:36. These words might have struck fear into Pilate's heart, planting a seed of doubt. Pilate's position put him in a tight spot. He couldn't simply ignore the Jewish leaders who were desperate to see Jesus executed. They asserted that Jesus had incited the people, questioning Rome's authority, and they demanded the indifference of a self-proclaimed king. They pressed Pilate, using the threat of unrest as leverage. "If you release this man, you are no friend of Caesar," they warned, John 19:12. This was a dangerous accusation. It implied that by sparing Jesus, Pilate would be disloyal to the emperor. Such an accusation could ruin Pilate's career, or worse, lead to his own death. Yet as Pilate looked into the eyes of Jesus, he found no signs of rebellion, no hatred toward Rome. Instead, he saw a calmness that must have unsettled him. Pilate declared to the crowd, "I find no basis for a charge against him," John 18:38. It was a rare moment where the powerful Roman governor seemed almost vulnerable, caught between the fear of an uprising and the haunting possibility that he was about to make a grave mistake. Even after sending Jesus to Herod Antipas, hoping to shift the responsibility, the decision fell back to Pilate. Herod mocked Jesus, but sent him back without a death sentence. It was clear that no Roman or local leader truly saw a threat in Jesus, yet the crowd's cries grew louder, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate must have felt the pressure closing in, like a noose tightening around his neck. He had the authority to save Jesus' life or condemn him to a brutal death on the cross, but either choice came with heavy consequences. At that moment, Pilate tried a last-ditch effort to avoid condemning Jesus. He offered to release a prisoner, as was customary during the Passover. He hoped the crowd would choose Jesus over Barabbas, a notorious criminal, but the crowd, stirred by the Jewish leaders, demanded the release of Barabbas instead. Pilate's gamble failed, and the decision fell on him. In one of history's most chilling moments, Pilate took a bowl of water, washed his hands in front of the crowd, and said, "I am innocent of this man's blood." Matthew 27:24. Pilate performed a symbolic act, demonstrating his lack of responsibility for the impending events. Pilate handed Jesus over for crucifixion, but his decision would reverberate throughout history. Political pressure and the threat of violence influenced his fearful decision. Pilate's courtroom became a battlefield of words and accusations. The Jewish leaders accused Jesus of blasphemy, of claiming to be the King of the Jews, a title that implied a direct challenge to Caesar's authority. But when Pilate interrogated Jesus, he found no evidence of any rebellion against Rome. In Roman law, treason and sedition were serious crimes, but there was no sign that Jesus intended to overthrow the emperor or incite an uprising. Instead, Pilate saw a religious dispute, a matter of faith and belief rather than a crime against the state. And according to Roman principles, if no crime could be proven, the accused should be set free. Pilate himself declared, "I find no basis for a charge against this man," Luke 23:4. But justice in theory didn't match the reality Pilate faced. However, fierce opposition met Pilate's attempts to act justly by Roman standards. The Jewish authorities didn't just want a verdict, they wanted blood. They claimed that Jesus' divinity threatened their religious order and the region's stability. They brought up charges such as Jesus forbidding people from paying taxes to Caesar, even though he had never actually made such a statement. These accusations aimed to corner Pilate, compelling him to perceive Jesus as a political danger. Here we encounter a critical concept, the manipulation of justice for political gain. The Sanhedrin, the Jewish council, knew that Rome valued order and feared rebellion more than anything. They used this to their advantage, knowing that Pilate, as a governor, couldn't afford a riot on his hands. It was a strategic move to turn what was fundamentally a religious disagreement into a political crisis. And Pilate, despite his power, found himself caught in a web of lies and pressure that made true justice nearly impossible. Now imagine Pilate's internal struggle. His authority to judge now felt like a trap to him. He knew that condemning an innocent man went against the very principles of Roman justice, but at the same time, he saw how quickly the situation was spiraling out of control. The mob outside was not only judging Jesus on trial, but also Pilate's ability to maintain peace and his career. To make things more complicated, the crowds demanded a choice between Jesus and Barabbas, a known criminal who had led a violent rebellion. It was a strange moment where the idea of justice seemed to be turned upside down. The release of Barabbas, a man guilty of murder, contrasted with the condemnation of Jesus, who had harmed no one. The verdict was unsettling, as if justice itself was on trial that day. What's even more troubling is the concept of public justice versus true justice. Pilate gave in to the demands of the crowd, allowing popular opinion to determine Jesus' fate. He chose to placate the mob rather than stand by the principles of fairness that Roman law was supposed to represent. This decision reveals a stark reality. Sometimes the voice of the majority doesn't align with what is truly right. In this moment, Pilate's washing of his hands in front of the people was symbolic. He wanted to show that he was not responsible for the death of Jesus, but in truth, he was turning away from the very essence of his role as a judge. It was an act of denial, a desperate attempt to distance himself from the injustice unfolding in front of him. But the act of washing his hands couldn't wash away the truth. Convenience and fear overshadowed the sacrifice of justice. This tale isn't just about politics or power plays, it's about hidden truths and mysteries that have remained locked away for centuries. Think about it. Pilate, a seasoned Roman official, was no stranger to difficult decisions. He had faced uprisings and rebellions and seen the faces of countless criminals and rebels. The Gospels hint at strange details that make us wonder about what really went through Pilate's mind. For example, his wife's mysterious dream warning him to avoid involvement in the trial of that righteous man. This was no ordinary dream. She called Jesus innocent, urging her husband to avoid any role in his death. But the mysteries don't end there. As Pilate questioned Jesus, their exchanges were anything but typical. When Pilate asked Jesus if he was the king of the Jews, Jesus responded with words that seemed to carry a deeper meaning. "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth." John 18:37. Some scholars believe that Pilate might have sensed the spiritual weight of the situation, even if he couldn't fully grasp it. Think about the fear he might have felt. A fear that maybe, just maybe, this man who spoke of a kingdom beyond this world truly had a connection to a higher power. Pilate might have wondered if he was dealing with a political prisoner or a figure who controlled more than Judea. And that thought, unsettling and mysterious, could have been what made Pilate so reluctant to condemn Jesus. But Pilate's uncertainty clashed with the harsh realities of his position. Rome expected results, not philosophical debates. He understood that failure to maintain control could portray him as weak. So, despite the mysteries swirling around him, Pilate chose to wash his hands of the matter, hoping to distance himself from a decision he couldn't fully understand. If you're enjoying this journey through the hidden stories of history, consider supporting the channel with a super thanks. Every contribution goes directly into researching, uncovering new insights, and bringing you stories that keep you thinking long after the video ends. Centuries later, ancient writings suggest that Pilate might have spoken of these experiences before his death. Some traditions claim that Pilate confessed to having witnessed something extraordinary in Jesus, something that profoundly challenged his beliefs. Some Christian traditions, particularly the Ethiopian and Coptic churches, remember Pilate not as a villain, but as a figure who eventually came to believe in Jesus' message. Some even venerate him as a saint, claiming that he repented for his actions. This stands in stark contrast to the way most people view him, as the man who ordered Jesus' crucifixion. Perhaps Pilate's greatest struggle was not with the crowd or the Sanhedrin, but with his own uncertainty and the nagging sense that he was caught up in a divine drama beyond his comprehension. His story serves as a reminder of how complicated the human heart can be. He was a man of authority, but he was also human, caught between duty and doubt, between the demands of an empire and the whispers of a deeper truth. Perhaps that's why his story still resonates today. It illustrates our struggles with complex choices. It challenges us to think about how fear, power, and responsibility can shape the course of our lives, often in ways we don't fully understand until it's too late. Yet perhaps that is the true power of this story, its ability to leave us questioning, wondering, and reflecting on the mysteries that lie beneath the surface of history. Pilate's decision, made in the heat of a tense morning so many centuries ago, remains a shadow over the events of that day, a mystery that pulls us back time and time again. It leaves us with the unsettling sense that even in the most documented of histories, some secrets remain just out of reach, like a whisper that fades into the wind. Perhaps the truth is not in the visible or verifiable details. Maybe the real truth lies in the questions we keep asking and in the mysteries that keep us searching for answers. And in that search, we come closer to understanding not just the past, but also the deeper truths that shape our world and our hearts. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history's shadows. Be part of our community by subscribing to this channel. Until the next video.